In this video you'll see the very first steps we've taken on our new farm, Orto Foresta, which is located near Florence, south of Florence, surrounded by the beautiful hills of the Tuscany region of Italy. And as you can see, there's woods and olive groves, and we're next to a river and one of the main arteries as well into the city of Florence from the south. In the next clip you'll see the river which really borders our field, and it's a beautiful resource. And now I'm going to show you a clip that I filmed in November 2022, 2 months before taking the farm, when the situation was really critical. So lots of things to clear. Let's have a look in the middle here, there's lots of wood. Existing vegetation is interesting. There's a lot of Artemisia, which I think is what live this. Some sunken paths and things like that. Probably was pipe going through. Now there's these guys, Pittosporum. No, not really. Might be some sort of bay leaf. I don't know really the spontaneous wild plants of this landscape, of this climate. I'm going to come back and identify these. And so there's a road that goes around there. These are ash trees, which is good. This is a very tall poplar. Also quite good for biomass, but it means that its roots will be quite competitive. Interesting. Need to make sure that the tree rows do not interfere too much with these big trees, but they need keeping tidy. And one huge problem will be managing this bamboo. So this seems to be more of a Australian type, and yeah, there's a big clump of it. So obviously we can't do much in this area. There is more bamboo around here, so we'll have to work around these things, but lots of potential nevertheless. So there's that. So machine still needs to run. Fencing needs to be fixed. There's the pipe, and here's the well. To get my suitcase in a minute. And here is this for tools, which is quite good. There's a huge tank, and that needs cleaning, that area. There's a lot there, there's a caravan in it. I'm going to go back this way so I can see where my suitcase is and where it might be stolen. Some more ash. Home oak. This is relatively clean in this area, which is really good. But bumpy. It is quite bumpy actually. The grasses are very vigorous, which will mean some difficulties to keep them up there, but we'll see. It's also a very good opportunity for biomass creation. So essentially, existing vegetation that's in the way. There's a big clump there, and I'll go and examine that in detail in a minute. There's this big poplar, and there's bamboo over there. And then there is these guys here, which could be cut down, to be honest. I don't think there's any problem with those. Some more concrete and plastic in the way here. Brambles. So this is essentially it, and the river is on that side. And here's the river, which is quite nice, very low compared to here, but this soil, native soil, is amazingly organic. This is going to be one of the most fertile soils we can have. It's alluvial soil, so full of silt and organic material that the river will have on its bed. So nice, yeah, lots of good things, but lots of challenges as well. Lots of challenges as well. And now we fast forward to January, when we next were able to access the field because we moved to Florence permanently. And here you can see there's a tractor with a flail mower attached to it. This is Andrea, our contractor, who has been doing some amazing work transforming really the field. And the first step was clearing by flailing the existing vegetation. And this revealed some less than ideal situations. The first one was the presence of landscape fabric under some of the grass, so it had got entwined with the existing vegetation, and this meant that the only way to get rid of it was to rip it, leaving the roots and the grass in it. And now it's been piled up at the corner of the field, in a corner of our field,
waiting for the organic material to dry up so that we can then differentiate it and throw away the plastic. Otherwise there wouldn't be any other way of dispose of it legally in Italy, because they don't accept material which is mixed, organic and plastic. So we're gonna have to wait before we can properly dispose of it. So be careful if you use landscape fabric, because you know it gets out of control and it becomes a huge problem. The next thing was the presence of a lot of imported soil that had been imported from the surrounding areas, from construction sites and earthworks sites. So we decided to subsoil it with a ripper. You can see it here, and in the next clip I'm going to discuss what this involves. I'm standing in front of our field, and it will look quite strange to some of you. First of all, you can see that the sod has been broken. The sod, what we call the sod, the undisturbed top layer of the ground, has been broken in a specific way. And you might think, oh, how come? You've tilled the ground and you always talk about never disturbing it, never digging it. That is true. But I've often mentioned this operation in our courses and in videos and other things, and this is called subsoiling. So it's not tillage as such. I mean, you can call anything tillage, but it's not mixing the layers of the soil. It's just ripping through the ground to create air, space, and to allow roots, water and nutrients to penetrate. This operation is done only once in the lifetime of this system. It shouldn't be needed again if you do the right thing from now on. And in most soils it's actually not needed. We needed to do it because, as you can see, most of this soil, there's at least 70 centimeters of rubble that was put on here. Fortunately, plants have done a little bit of work over the years, because it's been more than 30 years now that this matter, this imported soil, was deposited here. The plants have done their best to mix it up and create some organic matter, but it's mostly sand and stone, and this is not really the soil that belongs to this area. Underneath, about 40-50 centimeters down, there is really good soil, but unfortunately we have to work with this, and it was as hard as concrete, and so we needed to break through into it so that now the roots, the water and the nutrients can penetrate down and do not find a floor that is impenetrable. And the better way of doing this without digging and without mixing the soil too much is by ripping through it with a dip blade. And this is called subsoiling or ripping, and it's done with this tool which is attached to a tractor, and it's called, Italians call it a ripper, even though that's an English word. A subsoiler is another word. Ripuntatore is another Italian word. And you can see it's got shoes or blades. It can come with different numbers of blades. Usually the first three do the work, but when you want to properly rip a subsoiler, you can put 3 of them. There are different versions of them. The best one is called the yeoman plough, and it's a lot better than this because it explodes the soil sideways as well. This one mostly just rips through the ground with this shoe, and it doesn't mix. It doesn't have any motion that goes that way, so it doesn't mix the top and the bottom layers. It just cuts through the soil and creates this these gaps where the roots can penetrate. This is especially important here, not only because there's a lot of rubble and a lot of compaction, but because we're going to plant trees along certain rows, and therefore trees need to be able to go very deep with their roots straight away. Otherwise they're going to both interfere a little bit with the vegetables, but also not thrive. So yeah, this looks like tilled soil, but you can see very clearly it hasn't been mixed, it's just been cut. And in the cutting process, the grass obviously gets disturbed. Actually here there wasn't any grass because there was landscape fabric, and there is still a ton. I'm going to take advantage of this opportunity here to show you what a disastrous idea it is to apply landscape fabric and not dispose of it properly before going away. You know, we have mountains of this stuff and it gets all tangled with roots, and then we have to now allow it to just sit somewhere until the grass and the roots dry, and then we can dispose of it in a legal way. It will cost us a lot of money and a lot of time, and at the moment a lot of space that we'll need to dedicate to just let it sit and let the organic component decay before we can get rid of the plastic. But anyway, this is what it is. Under the that sheet of landscape fabric, which is, there is at least half an acre of it around the place. Underneath there is soil, and as I've said, this soil was imported. This ground was raised at least 60 centimeters over time, with truck driver was just getting soil from construction work and depositing it here. So it's very sandy at the top, but the bottom layer, as I've said, is really nice and fertile because we have the river next door. So over the centuries the river has brought very, very good soil here, and every time it flooded, again over the millennia, it brought up a lot of sediment and a lot of organic material. So you can see at the edges of this field how nice the soil actually is in the areas that haven't been disturbed. Let's have a look over here, for example. Look at this. This is nice and organic, and there's a lot of sand and silt, and this is actually a little bit too sandy here, but over here you can see, look at that, nice and black, untouched in many years, and the river is at the bottom there.
And now we go forwards again, where the field has been subsoiled in part, and there's still a part of a tunnel and quite a bit of vegetation, and lots of stones in the bit that has been subsoiled. Also very uneven surface. So the next step was to ask Andrea with the excavator to remove all the concrete, bricks and big stones that were still in the field. And then after that we asked him to rotivate just the top 10 centimeters of the soil to leave a slightly more even surface. And you can see it here in this clip that it has a huge impact on the surface of the soil, so it allows us to build beds on it without huge, mounds and drops in the level. So this is a disturbance which is minimal because very superficial, and it's only going to happen once. It's never going to be repeated. You see that the rotivator is very high up. It barely touches the surface.
Right, so a little bit of an update on the progress that's been made. You can see here the soil that has been worked. I'm going to show you actually what's been done after subsoiling. We broke up the top layer, just really the top 5 centimeters, so that it's a bit flatter and easier now to put compost on. Then there's this area where there's still a bit of a mess. A few trees were cut down. There's more trees or shrubs. Lots of landscape fabric was removed. And here there's a lot of clay. It's really strange because all of this soil was imported here. There's gravel, there's clay, there's also a lot of sand, and this, which looks like a tree, is actually ivy climbing up a sprinkler. That's a metal sprinkler. So this is the area where there's more work still to do. There's a lot of rubbish, a bit of metal. Hopefully all of the landscape fabric in this area has been removed. There might be more going that way, and this is going to be cleared tomorrow. Today Andrea did a lot of work clearing taking down really the tunnel. You might remember from previous videos there was a part of a tunnel which wasn't very stable, and it's been taken down and all the parts have been put there. And there was a lot of landscape fabric underneath the tunnel, and that was cleared as well. Well, it's still here in a pile, but it's going to go down at the bottom where we are piling up all of the waste materials that we will need to get rid of at some point. So this is really gravelly. Under the landscape fabric there was a lot of gravel. So yeah, not the best in this area. But there are areas that haven't been worked at all yet, which seem a tiny little bit better. So essentially now it looks like a wasteland, but it will soon look very different, I can guarantee. The goal was this week to get to the poplar, to get a big rectangle all around there, up to the level of the poplar essentially, so that we could cultivate it, essentially make beds. And it's a large area, it's 2,000 square meters, so it's shy of half an acre, which is not bad, especially considering there's going to be a few rows of trees and a lot of Nordic beds, but there's still a lot of work to do when we get past this area, because here is a lot more uneven and there is more landscape fabric, there is more rubbish, there are a few shrubs and trees that need removing. There was bamboo, now you can't see it, but here there was a big bamboo patch, so that needs excavating and putting the roots somewhere else, perhaps in pots where we can propagate it, but not in the middle of the field. There's more bamboo. It's all kind of gone now because I've cut a lot of it down myself. There was one bit there and one bit there, and we saved the canes for later use, and that needs excavating again. These trees were cut from the edges. This is an invasive tree, Ailanthus, which we'll use. It's really good biomass, very tender. And here's the rubbish area, not very nice to look at the moment, but there's a lot of wood, fortunately, and that's a resource, can be either burned or composted or made into biochar. But then there's this huge pile of landscape fabric tangled up with roots, and then there's tons of containers. Those were already there, they were cleared before we arrived, and lots of plastic there. There's a derelict caravan, lots of things to look at, but that will be work for the next chapter, probably second part of the year or next year, and we're not going to get to do much in this area. You see there's a big mound as well. There's a lot to do here, but this is going to happen later. So far we're going to focus up to the poplar as I showed you, and then perhaps we'll come up to this Ailanthus in the middle here. Next week we might get Andrea again to do some more work. This is a lot of work. It's a full week of really competent digger, driver and tractor worker. So one person doing non-stop work for 5 days in a row. So just to give you the idea of how much there was to do here, and also how much it's going to cost us. It's a few £1,000 at least. We're going to be shy probably of £5,000 to £6,000. So it's not the easiest, but it would have taken the two of us by hand with that machinery months. So it's going to give us a head start, and it's obviously a huge investment that we'll have to recoup by selling veg as soon as possible, running courses and doing stuff like that. But that's what you get when you take on a big challenge of regeneration.
And here we go forwards again to the 12th of February. You can see that there's still something to clear, and Andrea is at work at this very moment. But there is enough space to start building beds, and you can see in that top left corner we have started making some 15 meter long, 80 centimeters wide no dig beds.
Here we go, it's bed making time, so we're going to experiment a little bit with different strategies. You can see that we have marked a square of 9 beds. These beds are 80 centimeters wide, pads are 40 centimeters wide, and they're 15 meters long, a bit longer than our previous ones that we had in the UK. And then we were donated by Luca, who's a great guy in Pistoia near Florence. He donated to us a lot of sacks of horse manure of different levels of maturity, and some of them were rotten, some of them had more sawdust, shavings and hay in them, but that's fine. So we're going to experiment with different things and see whether we see differences. So we have more or less rotten horse manure at the bottom because there are some seeds in it from the hay, and so we want to avoid those getting too much light. In case, we can always tarp it, but for the moment we're leaving it like that. Then we put compost on top, and then we'll mulch, especially for the summer. If it gets hot very soon in spring, in late spring and in summer, we're going to put some hay on top, so that reflects, rather than, the compost is black and absorbs a lot of heat, and it's also very, it's got very fine tilth, so that's not ideal in that sense. But we're going to mulch the compost with some hay or straw or whatever we can find around, and the footpaths will have some wood chip as usual, at least for now. Then we'll see, we might move on to hay or other stuff in the future. And Flavia is now spreading the horse manure for the bottom level, which is in these sacks, and then we've marked this 9 bed block, but there will be more, an extra 9 beds here and an extra 9 beds there, so in general there'll be big blocks of 27, so 9 beds, and then along that ribbon, the line there's going to be a tree row, and then the same thing, 27 beds, 9, and then another tree row, and then another one where the poplar, the big tree, is. There'll be another tree row there. So let me show you the materials we're using. You've seen the horse manure. Let me know if you want to see and discuss more about horse manure, how to understand how rotten it is and stuff like that. This is the compost we're going to use. It comes from wood, green waste material, mostly wood prunings. So there's a lot of wood which was also charred, because some of it was half burned and then was chopped and composted, but there are also some big chunks, so those we'll need to remove. It's kind of a cheapish product, and it's got a lot of wood but also a bit of char, so it's got drawbacks and advantages, but we're trying to move away from this and finding a better source of cheaper and bulkier and finer compost. Again, we're not going to use a ton of compost like in the past. We're going to use a little bit just for these first few beds really. In the future we might start beds with cover crops and green manures, but now we need to get going very soon. So compost plus horse manure plus hay will give us a nice lasagna style bed to start with. And I'm going to show you the last bit of material that we're going to use, which is wood chip. And this, we get £30 or €30 a load, and this is a load, that's a load including this, so there's 2 loads at the moment. So this is €60 worth of material, which is not bad. We're going to get some for free as well, but we'll see. And this is pine, needles and chip, and this is poplar with a lot of broken down bark, and this is bamboo, poplar, a bit of grass, actually a lot of leaf in it, which is good in fact. And then we got some willow in here, but also some what do you call it, Laurus nobilis, bay leaf. So this is the wood chip we have at the moment. Will be enough for those 9 beds at the moment, and we'll get going planting some stuff soon. We'll probably let the weeds germinate first, because remember, we haven't been able to occultate, we haven't been able to tarp this at all, and we have also disturbed it, so there'll be a lot of weeds. So we're going to let them germinate and then properly tarp, so we get a head start. That's called the stale seed bed technique. You let weeds germinate as if you were to want the weeds, and then you cover them, so that they have no choice going dormant again. They've started germinating, so they have to die under the tarp. So that's one option we're going to employ here if the weed pressure is too strong. And then we're going to move on probably next week and do another 9 beds and another 9 beds. And in 10 days time or 2 weeks time, we'll have the trees to plant in there. We have to do a bit of work. There's a big hole there. There's lots to do, but stay tuned and you'll see how.
And you'll hopefully see in the next few videos these beds multiply. We have volunteers coming this week to help us and get to know us from the local area. So we're really chuffed to meet new people and get some help. And looking forward to seeing this field completely transformed into a food growing haven with fruit trees and vegetables. Stay tuned.